This is TBK's Truth Frame, revealing the echoes of history across our world. When the Palestinian struggle went global, Leila Khaled, George Habash, and the Japanese Red Army. A story of revolution, spectacle, and the youth who saw defiance as dignity. Introduction: A World on Fire. By the late 1960s, the Palestinian struggle had burst beyond the borders of the Middle East. The refugee camps of Lebanon, Jordan, and Gaza were filled with a generation raised on dispossession and determined to be heard. But the world wasn't listening. Not to the massacres. Not to the expulsions. Not to the erasure of a people. So some factions of the Palestinian movement turned to a new strategy, internationalizing the struggle through spectacular, headline-grabbing operations. Three names soon dominated global news. Leila Khaled, the first woman to hijack an airplane, a symbol of defiant resistance. George Habash, the doctor-turned-revolutionary who founded the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP. The Japanese Red Army, a radical leftist group that partnered with the PFLP to strike at shared enemies. Their actions shocked the world and electrified youth movements across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. George Habash, the strategist who globalized the struggle. George Habash, a Palestinian Christian physician from Lydda, watched his hometown emptied in 1948. That trauma shaped his life's mission, to build a revolutionary movement capable of confronting Israel and Western imperialism. His vision: unite Arab revolutionaries under a single anti-imperialist front. Strike symbolic targets to force the world to acknowledge Palestinian suffering. Build alliances with global leftist movements. Habash founded the Arab nationalist movement, which later evolved into the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, a Marxist-Leninist faction that believed armed struggle was the only language the world respected. Under his leadership, the PFLP pioneered a new tactic, airplane hijackings as political theater. And at the center of this theater stood a young woman who would become an icon. Leila Khaled, the face of defiance. Leila Khaled was born in Haifa in 1944. At age 4, she became a refugee during the 1948 expulsion. That wound, losing her birthplace, became the emotional engine of her political life. At 15, she joined the Arab nationalist movement, following her brother's footsteps. After 1967, she became part of the PFLP, where her charisma, discipline, and ideological clarity made her stand out. The hijacking that changed everything, 1969. On August 29, 1969, Khaled boarded TWA Flight 840. Her mission: divert the plane to Damascus and make the world say the word Palestine again. No passengers were harmed. But the image of her, AK-47 in hand, keffiyeh wrapped around her head, became one of the most reproduced revolutionary photographs of the 20th century. She asked the pilot to fly over Haifa so she could see her hometown one more time. That detail alone turned her into a symbol of longing. After the passengers disembarked, the plane's nose was blown up, a message, not a massacre. Becoming an icon. The world was stunned. But across the global south, from Colombo to Caracas, she became a heroine. Why? Because she embodied something rare, a woman from a refugee camp who forced the world's most powerful nations to acknowledge her people. Her image appeared on posters, murals, and student banners. She underwent plastic surgery afterward to avoid recognition, not out of vanity, but because she refused to become a static icon. She wanted to continue the struggle. The second hijacking, 1970. A year later, she attempted to hijack LL Flight 219 as part of the coordinated Dawson's Field hijackings. This time, things went wrong. Her partner, Patrick Arguello, was killed. She was captured in the UK, and later released in a prisoner exchange. But by then, her legend was sealed. The Japanese Red Army, Revolution Without Borders. In the early 1970s, the PFLP found an unlikely ally, the Japanese Red Army, JRA, a militant far-left group seeking global revolution. Why Japan? Because the JRA believed the Palestinian struggle was the front line of anti-imperialism. Because Habash welcomed international fighters who shared the ideology. Because the Middle East became a training ground for radical movements worldwide. The alliance. The JRA trained in PFLP camps in Lebanon. They received support from Libya, Syria, and North Korea. They carried out attacks that amplified the Palestinian cause. Their most infamous operation was the Lod Airport Massacre, 1972, a brutal attack that killed 26 people. It horrified the world and marked the darkest chapter of the PFLP-JRA collaboration. But it also showed how far the Palestinian struggle had radiated, reaching Tokyo, Dhaka, Kuala Lumpur, and beyond. The Global South and the Politics of Heroism. To understand why Leila Khaled became a heroine to youth in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, we must understand the era. This was the age of Vietnam. Che Guevara, Patrice Lumumba, anti-colonial uprisings, student revolutions, the non-aligned movement. Young people across the Third World saw themselves in the Palestinians. Dispossessed, ignored, fighting for dignity. Leila Khaled wasn't just a hijacker. She was a symbol of a woman refusing erasure. A refugee who refused to disappear. A face that said, "We exist. You will not forget us." Her image became a cultural shorthand for resistance, even among those who rejected violence. The costs, the consequences, the legacy. The era of hijackings eventually ended. The PFLP lost influence. The Japanese Red Army dissolved. The Palestinian movement shifted toward diplomacy and mass uprisings. But the legacy of that period remains complicated. It forced the world to acknowledge Palestinian identity. It also hardened global counterterrorism frameworks. It left moral questions that still haunt the movement. And yet, Leila Khaled remains, to this day, a living symbol of a time when the powerless seized the global stage. This episode traces a powerful arc. The birth of international militancy in the Palestinian struggle, when the conflict leapt from refugee camps to the global stage. The personalities who shaped this era, George Habash, Leila Khaled, and the Japanese Red Army, each driven by ideology, trauma, and a belief that only dramatic action could force the world to listen. The emotional and political logic behind their choices, a generation raised on dispossession, convinced that symbolic violence was the only remaining language of power. The global youth who saw Leila Khaled as a mirror, a refugee girl who refused erasure, a woman who embodied defiance, and a symbol of dignity reclaimed through action. Conclusion. In the end, this story is not just about hijackings, manifestos, or the shockwaves that rippled through airports and capitals. It is about a moment in history when the world's forgotten people refused to remain invisible. George Habash gave the movement its ideological spine. The Japanese Red Army gave it reach. But it was Leila Khaled who gave it a face, a young woman with a keffiyeh, an AK-47, and a memory of a lost city she could only glimpse from the sky. To millions of youth across the global south, she was not a terrorist. She was a symbol of what it meant to stand up when the world insisted you kneel. A reminder that dignity, once taken, demands to be reclaimed. Her image, fierce, composed, unbroken, became a shorthand for every struggle against erasure. For every community pushed to the margins. For every young person who believed that history could still be bent toward justice. And that is the truth this episode leaves us with. When the powerful closed every door, the powerless forced open a window in the sky. When the world refused to hear the word Palestine, a young woman made it impossible to ignore. And in her defiance, entire generations saw their own reflection, wounded, determined, unafraid. This is not an endorsement of violence. It is a recognition of the emotional landscape that produced it, and the human longing for dignity that still echoes today. What Leila Khaled is doing today. Leila Khaled is now in her early 80s and remains a prominent political figure within the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP. She no longer participates in militant operations. Instead, her role has shifted into 1. World's forgotten people refuse public advocacy and political engagement. She continues to speak at conferences, solidarity events, and political forums, especially those focused on Palestinian liberation, anti-imperialism, and global resistance movements. 2. Symbolic leadership. Khaled is widely treated as a symbolic elder of the Palestinian struggle. Her presence at events often serves as a reminder of the revolutionary era of the 1960s, 70s and the unresolved questions of displacement, dignity, and resistance. 3. Recent health update, 2025. According to a 2025 report, she was hospitalized after suffering an intracranial hemorrhage, stroke. She has been receiving medical care and recovering with her family around her. 4. Continued influence in global solidarity movements. She remains a reference point for activists worldwide. Interviews and commentary published as recently as 2024 to 2025 show her still reflecting on the meaning of resistance, the shifting global landscape, and the future of Palestinian liberation. Today, Leila Khaled lives not as the young woman with the keffiyeh and the rifle, but as an elder whose life has become part of the political memory of an entire people. Her battles are no longer fought in the skies but in the realm of history, narrative, and moral conviction. She speaks softly now, but her words still carry the weight of a generation that refused to disappear. Even in illness, she remains a symbol, not of violence, but of a people's refusal to be erased. And perhaps that is her final legacy. A reminder that resistance is not only an act of force, but an act of memory. That even when the body weakens, the story continues. and that some figures become immortal not because of what they destroyed, but because of what they insisted the world must see. This is TBK's Truth Frame. Please like and subscribe for more frames. Thank you for stepping into this frame of truth. If this story moved you, share it forward and help restore the voices time tried to erase. Until the next episode, stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep the memory alive.